Welcome to the Country Telegraph. It's a Tuesday, feels like a Monday. Must have been Easter. Hope you had a great Easter too. A very busy show today, and we are looking forward to it enormously. First of all, though, just some of the headlines making news right around the country for rural, regional and outback Australia. Farmers in northern Victoria's Dookie region say they have been blindsided by plans to declare the area a renewable energy zone, warning the move threatens some of the most productive cropping land in the state. Local grain growers said the decision was made without consultation and could see prime agricultural country carved up by solar, wind and transmission infrastructure, which is just terrible. In fact, we'll talk to somebody from Shepparton in this hour. Now, nearly 150 head of sheep stolen from two wheatbelt farms have occurred in WA, in Western Australia. The Rural Crime Squad is investigating after nearly 150 head of sheep were stolen from two wheatbelt properties as farmers gear up for lambing season. Murray-Darling Basin farmers face a $1.8 billion buyout assault this year. That's despite official analysis showing minimal environmental benefits for most river systems. The Albanese government will have stripped Murray-Darling Basin irrigation communities of 90% of the water needed to meet its 450 gigalitre Restoring Our Rivers target by Christmas, and that's according to its latest claims. A family-owned table grape enterprise in Victoria's northwest has changed hands after it was snapped up by Victorian table grape grower Paramount Farms, Australia. 888 or 888 Produce in Coolong in Sunraysia, located 10k southwest of Mildura, was sold as an entity for more than $7 million after it was listed for sale last year. And finally, Frontiera has finalised the sale of its Australian assets to French giant Lactalis, with farmers expressing some trepidation about potential changes to processor relationships. The sale effectively ends Frontiera's two-decade stint in Australia and with its associated brands, including Mainland, Western Star and Perfect Italiano to Lactalis. French government will join Saputo and Bega in controlling nearly 70% of Australia's processing capacity, and that's collectively. So a very, very big move there from a French giant, and let's hope it all augurs well for the future. Professor Peter Draper is Executive Director, the Institute for International Trade and School of Economics. He is also a Director of the Jean Monnet Centre in Excellence in Trade and Environment, a steering committee member of the G20 Trade and Investment Research Network. First of all, Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
Just
the opportunity.
And a great pleasure too, and we do deal with interests and specifically issues that concerned regional, rural and also outback Australia. Let's talk about the world trade environment, which was difficult before Donald Trump and in the conflict in the Middle East, and then the tariffs, and now the Middle East crisis. How's it all looking for Australia?
Well, the broad environment's looking pretty grim, I would say, for all the reasons you set out in that brief introduction, Mike. So on the tariffs front, I suppose there's been relatively good news by the Trump administration standards when the Supreme Court overturned his reciprocal tariffs, his across-the-board tariffs. Australia was subjected to the 10% duty, as I think is well known. So those are gone, but replaced with another form of tariffs, also 10%. And now a series of investigations is underway. Australia is in the frame, as we know, along with a range of other countries. So there's further action on the tariff front that is pending. I think the real change in the last few weeks is the Gulf War, and that has serious impacts on the agricultural community, as you and your viewers know far better than I do, and through things like fertilizer prices and availability and pricing of energy and diesel in particular. So, and then, broadly speaking, the global trading system is not in a good place. We saw just last week most ministers of the WTO or World Trade Organization's member states met in Yaoundé in Cameroon to try and agree on how to reform the organization, amongst other things, and they couldn't even agree on that. So it's not a good environment overall.
What's your views about energy and supply chains?
Well, it's a tough environment. So we depend, as we know, ultimately on flows of oil and derivative products from the Middle East, and there is a block on the Strait of Hormuz. So the country has probably a month's worth of supply. Maybe we can restore some of that, working with our trading partners, particularly refined petroleum, jet fuel, for instance, from Taiwan. China is restricting jet fuel exports now. So we shall have to see, and it really depends on how long and how serious the Middle East conflict drags on for and gets, respectively, because the region that we're part of sources most of its energy from the Gulf region, but it's bottled up right now and for the foreseeable future. And the situation could get a whole lot worse, as we know.
It's a shocker, and it's a war that Donald Trump went into, blames the rest of the world for not joining him. And it's easy to go into a war, but you probably need a plan how you're going to exit it too. And at the moment, he talks about withdrawal, and the rest of the world can worry about the Strait of Hormuz, which doesn't augur well for the rest of the world. Anyway, best laid plans of mice and idiots. If you could tell me your thoughts on food production and distribution, because I can see already a survey has been done with fruit and veggie growers, and there's about a 25% downside to that they're not going to grow any fruit and veggies for that year. So already we're down by 25%. Then you throw in the cost of fuel, and as you said, it's quite dicey, to say the least. Where do you see this heading? I mean, if we have less food on the shelves, prices itself will just go up because demand will exceed supply. And then you have the cost of transporting, and forget the transporting bit, just making sure you can pick that fruit and all those vegetables, that you can get the fertilizer, and then you've got to transport it. Again, it doesn't augur well for the future, does it?
Not at all, and I think that's why economists, generally speaking, are very concerned about not just the price level and the price of food, the price of many things is affected by these energy bottlenecks. For the farming community, obviously, it's access to fertilizer, but also just basic energy inputs in the form of diesel and petrol. And just getting your goods to market is a major constraint, and is going to become worse, as we discussed. But also interest rates are likely to go up, and potentially not just one time, but 2 or 3 times, who knows? So we have to see what the Reserve Bank decides. And so that adds further cost pressures, not just to the farming community, but to the economy as a whole. And on top of that, our export markets, while they will continue to need to import food, some of them, particularly the Middle East, are much more difficult to access now. And then there's the access to fuel to transport all of those food products, amongst others. So everywhere you look, you just see problems building up through supply chains. And at the heart of that is this energy bottleneck that's emerged and is likely to get much worse.
We have Donald Trump, who's president of the universe, and of course there's the Queen von der Leyen, Ursula, which she was out here, and they've moving towards a EU-Australia trade agreement that most farmers aren't very happy with. What's your thoughts on the EU-Australia trade agreement? Why did Australia not take it up earlier? Why has it taken so long?
So firstly, I'm broadly in favour of the agreement. So that's because there's a whole range of trade and investment-related matters that transcend the farming community. So things like critical minerals, for instance, but also importation of vehicles from the EU, and the very big box that we could call services trade. So things like movement of people through enhanced visa arrangements, but also opening up access for our banks, insurance companies, super funds, etc., in the European Union market. So there's a lot on the table, and one has to look at the agreement holistically. I think if I was a farmer, particularly a beef farmer, I would be quite upset with the arrangements because the EU has not offered much market access. But in the broader context of the deal, and these deals always involve trade-offs, unfortunately that interest was to some extent sacrificed. But that said, if I just look at the beef market access arrangements, for instance, it's approximately double the quota that we experienced prior to Donald Trump again, that man, insisting that all Australia, Latin American quotas, etc., be allocated to the United States during his first Trump administration. So this deal is some kind of compensation for that changing of the prior arrangements, if viewed through the narrow beef market access lens. But then one also has to sit there at this deal, I think, in a broader international political economy context. And that was the essence of the von der Leyen speech in Parliament. And she's right to say that in a world where Donald Trump is shaking everything up, all the old arrangements, the rules-based order is no longer, it seems, then middle powers, and the European countries or the EU is a collection of middle powers. And countries like Australia that are like-minded and want to preserve what they can in the system, they need to work together, they need to come together and form common arrangements. And in that context, this kind of agreement, I think, is very important as well. So there's a lot of pluses, some minuses for sure, and particularly if I were a farmer or potentially an exporter of Prosecco, for instance, to name another agriculturally derived commodity.
I find it very, very intriguing at the moment, and we seem to be, I wouldn't say making a big line for the EU, but we are a lot more open to the EU, and I'm just wondering whether that's the what they call it, the Trump syndrome or something like that. But Donald Trump is certainly not endearing to his neighbours at the moment, and I think that's a real pity because. Such a relationship is necessary, I think, for Australia to have a strong relationship with the US, and that's looking very, very, very dicey. I mean, he doesn't like Australia at the moment, but he could change. And which way the wind blows, he'll have another decision tomorrow, I would imagine. Just like his war with Iran, we've wiped out Iran, yet they keep firing missiles. So obviously, there was a bit of a porky in there. Maybe a bit of a geeing up of the troops. Could you tell me the climate, or if you can clarify the climate provisions that's associated with the EU, and to what extent is Australia bound if another government is elected? Could they, throw those provisions out with the bathwater, or is it going to be a noose around every government's neck from now onwards?
So the provisional agreement was released over the weekend, more or less. I haven't had time to check that particular element of the agreement. But from what I've heard previously, and unlike the New Zealand EU free trade agreement, we have not inscribed our Paris Agreement commitments into this particular text, but that I need to still check in the text itself. New Zealand did, so they bound themselves through the free trade agreement to their stated Paris Agreement goals. That said, Paris Agreement goals can change depending on the government of the day. And at the end of the day, Paris Agreement goals are what the UNFCCC calls nationally determined contributions, which means it's a bottom-up process of target setting. So if a new government comes in and says, we're not going to be bound by the previous government's targets, it's within their remit to change that target, and they won't be bound, I don't think, by this particular agreement.
Yeah, I think it's all very interesting. And if I was a farmer at the moment, it's not going to be an easy next 12 months at least, maybe 2 years. Not only do they have to worry about weather, which has been pretty wild this last few months, although it is still cyclone season, so it has been very wild. And then you have droughts in Victoria. Then you have, above that, you have governments creating all sorts of headaches for farming, and it's very tough. But I think farming is very important, whether it's growing oranges or looking after sheep or vegetables. It's what feeds Australia, and if we disrupt that chain and make it harder for farmers to grow that particular produce or product, it then will be represented in the supermarket, and then people will be getting fairly upset at that current government. So they need to take a little more notice, I would think, on the farming sector. Professor Peter Draper, if somebody wants to find out more about what you do or what your department does or your school does, how can we find out more about that?
Oh, well, thanks for it, Mike. Appreciate it. So we have the LinkedIn page. So that's our social media platform of choice, or you can follow me personally or my colleagues, and we do post. We also publish in The Conversation. We have a fairly regular output through that platform. And the new Adelaide University that we're part of, you can get onto our website and learn more about us through that channel. But otherwise, just pick up the phone and give me a call. Always happy to chat. Yeah.
And you've got a very big week this week. You've got the football, or the clubs come to Adelaide.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, you're going to see some big games in the wine region of South Australia. I wonder how many will have a drink before.
I'm sure a few will.
Yeah, I know the supporters will, but what a fantastic opportunity for the just the economy for South Australia and putting parts on the map. And I think it's I'm fairly critical of the government, but I have to say this is a great event, and it's sort of, we at times do need to have a sort of an escape from reality, don't we?
Definitely. It's a good one. Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for your time. We'll do this again if you don't mind. I really appreciate your time. This is the Country Telegraph.
Thanks.
So Wild Mountain straddles a ridge that runs up to the McPherson Range, which runs east-west, and that's the New South Wales-Queensland border. We want to move people. We want them to be engaged with the natural world and to realise that there is a place where you can come, where you can get back in touch with nature, be with like-minded people who are interesting and varied, from young and old.
It's really amazing to be here on the ground with incredible organisations like Wild Mountains. They're really the backbones of communities. So we're really proud to be able to support organisations like this to withstand disaster risk that they might face and continue to do the good work that they do into the future.
In 2019, the fires came to within about 12 kilometres, and if we need to evacuate, we have the potential for leaving and turning on a sprinkler system that allows the water to keep going for at least 8 hours to keep the buildings damp and stop ember attack, which I think is wonderful. And I think that RSEQ helping support the community in that, I think, is great.
Buy Australian made, and you're backing local jobs, a stronger economy, and the way we live right here. Australian made right here.
10 years ago, Aussie Dairy made a promise. A promise to protect our environment. A promise to provide the best care for our animals. A promise to build a healthier Australia. Since then, we've become global leaders in sustainable dairy production. But we won't stop there. We're taking action every day by putting initiatives in place across our entire dairy industry because we promise to protect what matters most.
How do I check my skin? What am I looking for? And what do I do if I see a spot on my skin that I'm worried about? It's really important to check your skin and be aware of what's on your skin. You're the best judge, so you know what's on it and what's new or changing or different. We tell people to check their skin at the change of every season, so about 4 times a year, and make sure you do it systematically. So start at the places you can see and maybe ask a friend or someone at home to check your back, places you can't see. You're looking for things that stand out, that are different to their neighbours, that are growing or changing with time. And sometimes skin cancers will be tender or they'll be bleeding, but not always. So if there's something strange on your skin, make sure you go to your doctor and get it checked.
No matter who you are, you'll find a place to belong here.
Join Lions and help shape a community we're proud to call home.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Nice to have your company. John Pettigrew has a long history within the Goulburn Valley fruit industry as a grower and director of SPC Limited. John, who's now retired and living in Shepparton, has served on various water industry advisory boards and water service committees. In 2002, John was appointed to the boards of Goulburn Murray Water and the Goulburn Broken Catchment Management Authority. Now, he has a keen interest in the environment, and also the resource management, extensive water policy, and a ton of experience in that area too, and has recently been appointed to the MDBA Community Committee. John is currently Secretary of the Goulburn Valley Environment Group, GVEG, and an active member of the Lifeblood Alliance. That's an alliance of grassroots environment groups and individuals from across the Murray-Darling Basin. He lives in Shepparton, Victoria. First of all, John, thanks for joining us.
G'day, Mike. Good to meet you.
Yeah, I used to work at 3SR many years ago. My wife's from Shepparton, so I know Shepparton very well indeed.
Oh, I'd keep that on your CV.
Well, it's a magnificent part of the world, isn't it? And I think, and it's because it's so close to Melbourne. It's a nice way for, if you're in Melbourne, you can just pop down to Shep, have a nice weekend away, enjoy some fantastic food and some good vino, and head back to Melbourne on a Sunday afternoon. And it's a magnificent part of the world. Tell us about the Goulburn Valley and its contribution to the GDP.
The Goulburn Valley is, we're situated in the heart of Victoria, we call it, Northern Victoria. With the food bowl of Victoria, but we depend on rural industries in the past, predominantly processing as well as the industries. This has been based on high security water allocations that Victoria has had from very early on for well over 100 years. The processing industries, whether it's dairying, fruit, or other industries, all important. They're situated in northern Victoria predominantly, and even though we do source a lot of material products from southern New South Wales across the border. But no, it's a wonderful autumn day here. The climate in this area is perfectly suited to export pears. Hence, the horticulture industry has been very strong. I could be a bit biased, but
good on you.
It's a wonderful fruit growing area.
It is. It's and I have to be nice because that's where my wife's from. So I have to be very nice about Shep, but it's not hard to be nice either. Hey, tell me about the fuel situation. Is it really creating havoc at the moment?
It's creating change, Mike. There's no doubt all of us have a look at how essential our next trip is going to be. It's certainly almost doubled in price, diesel and unleaded fuel. But apart from that first week when there were huge queues, it seems to have settled down a bit, and no trouble getting fuel in Shepparton at the moment.
Yeah, it's I've often talked to people from various rural areas, right across the country, and the common thread is that government, whether it's state or federal, doesn't really understand the rural sector enough. And they understand a little bit that they head to the supermarket, they're going to find that if the cost of veggies or fruit, other produce is expensive, then they realise that they need to do something about it. But in these people's mind, in my mind, that's probably about as far as a lot of them go. How do we make the governments, whether they're state or federal, sit up and take more notice of for example, of Shepparton? Because Shepparton, like any other area, like you've got Saraisi, you've got places around Victoria, Queensland, everywhere. How do we make government take more notice and appreciate how important the rural and country sector really is?
I think it's demonstrating our ability to change. The Golden Valley here has a history of enormous change over the last 30, 40 years. Going back 30 years or so, we had a terrible issue with salinity, rising salinity right through our irrigation areas. And we come together as a community, joined partnerships with all government departments, had the trust of government, and really made some enormous changes. Those changes not only solved the issue of rising salinity and drainage, but it also paved the way for catchment management authorities in Victoria, many other areas. And look, I think it's the ability of communities to give government confidence that they have the capacity to change and the willingness to change. Not always easy, but you have to demonstrate that sort of confidence.
Yeah, I know. When I worked in Shepparton, we actually didn't have horses. We actually had automobiles. But change is generally regarded as a good thing. Is all the change in for example, in and around Shepparton and Goulburn Valley, Mooroopna, those areas, has it all been positive, or do you think maybe at times we've got it wrong?
At the time you suspect we've got it wrong, but looking back, Mike, I lived in a country area just out of Shepparton, Bunbartha. We grew peaches out there on beautiful sandy soils. We lost our primary school in the 90s, and it was a terrible thing to happen to a small community like that. But change happens, and you adapt. The kids get to jump on a bus and go to another school. People now are travelling into Shepparton for work more and more. Times change, but look, at the time some of these things seem insurmountable, but I think it's a matter of us adjusting.
Yeah, I also agree there. I think because part of human nature is that we don't like change, do we, at times? It's, yeah, the good old days. And then it's funny how your grandchildren, they say the same thing, and it just keeps going and going. But I think change is important too. But I think we have to protect these areas. We have to protect the rural sector, the farming sector. What is needed, do you think, to protect it, not just from government, but from all the uglies that are happening around us right now?
Look, I think let's see, our processing industries are important. We need to maintain those wherever possible. I think the environment has certainly needed some attention. The Basin Plan has stepped in there, but we're an exporting nation, and we can't just ignore our ability to export to these countries. We have to also maintain relationships with those countries. So you can't just put up the barriers against imports. We have to live with those, I'm convinced, but we certainly need to position ourselves better for exporting.
What about water management? What have we done right, and what can we do better?
Look, I think you can always do better. Looking back, the people that have no regrets aren't really living, I don't think, Mike. You'd always do things better, I think, or differently looking back. One of the biggest changes we've seen here on water was the water reforms, which come in almost a decade before the Basin Plan, and that was resulted in the water market being developed and water being separated from land. Major changes that had both positive and negative impacts on the area. Negative impacts in that it sent water, the ability to trade water downstream, to huge horticultural developments, taking water out of our area, but also at the same time damaging our rivers in the process. So I would certainly have made changes there. We needed to have the ability to fine-tune the amount of water being transferred. There's no question that the decision at the time to make better value of the nation's water resources, we were certainly successful there. We've transferred water to areas where the greatest value to the nation is, but in doing so we needed to fine-tune it at the time to make sure there's no unintended consequences.
Funny, my wife, SPC, I mean, there you are, there's a bit of loyalty. But
Yes.
how important, I mean, just using SPC as an example,
Yes.
how important are institutions like, and it is an institution that I think since 1918, I'm sure you weren't there then, but how important is it for a community to have these large factories?
Look, I think it's important to the community. The community relates to companies like SPC. SPC has changed dramatically, Mike. It's not processing the amount of fruit it has in the past, but it's still in existence. The fruit industry as a whole in the Goulburn Valley, overall, the production hasn't changed much. The fresh fruit industry side of it has increased dramatically. The market is looking for fresh, healthy foods more so than processed foods these days. So it's an example of change that was always coming. But no, we've had some very strong dairy factories here with names that go back a long time. But they've changed. The dairy industry here at the moment, in my view, has, if you like, it's changing to more boutique factories. There's probably more processors in the area than we've had in the past. They're not your huge bulk dairy companies that are dealing in bulk products. They're more high value products. The fruit industry's gone a similar way.
Do you, when I grew up, and some say I haven't, in St. Razia, And I lived in a place huge place between Cardross and Sunnycliffs near Redcliffs, which had 2,000 people in it. And we were surrounded by 20-acre blocks. And
Yes.
with this very strong community. And the same for most of the rural areas around, unless you had sheep or cattle, but the rest of it, you had these small blocks. And as time moved on, those smaller blocks were swallowed by a bigger one, and then you have bigger ones. In my opinion, the negativity for that becoming more efficient is that it actually does a lot of damage to the community. How does a community, because you lose people, you lose that sense of ownership, how do you regain or retain that ownership of the local community, at the same time have the foresight and the nous to move forward with what is required?
Yeah, this gets back to the ability to change, Mike. We had the same issue. We still have the same issue in northern Victoria. A lot of the original fruit blocks were 24-acre fruit blocks. Dairy farms were always a bit larger, but those size blocks are no longer viable in the world we live in today. A lot of those blocks are now what you'd call lifestyle blocks. A lot have been amalgamated and brought in outside interests, big companies that are taking over blocks. Most of that change still requires the same amount of employment. There's little change in that, but it's you're correct. You do lose the character of some of those smaller areas, and I don't know. It takes people in those areas to maintain the enthusiasm of those regions. There's some characters out there. Some people might say Pettigrew is one of them, but a couple of people can make an enormous difference to an area. They really can.
Yeah, I used to. Sunday, where I grew up, and it was really interesting because we were surrounded by all these Italians. So on Sunday, we'd go to church, come home, and as you're driving past into our driveway, because we had a long driveway into the house on the orchard, we could smell the bread cooking. The Italians have that kiln in the backyard, and you could smell it because we're going over to their house for lunch. And you get to the house, and there'd be their family and neighbours and stuff, and you'd be sitting around eating this. I can never forget it. This fresh bread that was almost like bubble gum. You're chewing it, but ton of butter. There goes the heart, but ton of butter. And then you'd have this chicken in these bowls and other foods, and the menfolk would drink grappa. And I just thought, but it was a great lifestyle, and it had that community feel. And I've been back a bunch of times to my hometown, and it's no longer there. It's just a couple of big supermarkets, and there's big shopping centres, but it's lost that feel. But maybe as housing prices become more expensive in the major cities, that people can actually move to the bush and get a decent place to live in. And they could, by moving back to the bush or moving to the bush, you can start to regrow that community, which I think is so important. And I think you would agree, in our day, it made Australia what it became for a long time. And I think we need to get that community back, because I think that's what made Australians so great.
No, you're right. It was a wonderful place to grow up in this Golden Valley. The sporting facilities, we still have them. If young families growing up, and it's we've seen to have lost it, but those crafts are still out there. As one of the benefits of being a fruit grower was that years ago we used to employ a whole lot of Hungarians. They were wild men, but they would come from the cane cutting in Queensland down to pick our peaches, and the Hungarian goulash I can still smell. The Hungarian
You know,
goulash.
you are my priest at this stage. I'm in confession, and I had my first drink when I was 15, and it was grappa, and it was Louis Montleone and his family's fault, and truly, I had one drink of grappa, and I've never touched that petrol again. So there you are. There's an answer for our fuel crisis, just full of grappa, but.
That's right.
But yeah, they were good days, and I think we need to embrace those and look back upon those with fondness. But we need to move forward. But I think we need to get that community back together again, and that's why SPC was so good for Shep. And Marupna, the fruit salad capital of the world, but it made those areas great to live in.
No, we shouldn't forget Ardmona. Ardmona was always competition to our SPC. No, don't underestimate Ardmona. No.
Look, it's been a real pleasure. I have to tell you, I've enjoyed this immensely, and maybe we can do it again. John Pettigrew, thank you so much for your time. What's your weather like today in Shep? I would imagine it's about 21.
Supposed to be about 26 degrees, almost warm enough for me to be swimming in the Golden River.
Yeah, you're crazy. That's crazy.
Perfect.
I like the heated pool. John, thank you so much for your time, and we'll do this again. John Pettigrew there. This is the Country Telegraph.
G'day, Troy Casadale here. I've been travelling around this country playing music for more years than I'd like to remember. I've spent a lot of time on stage, but I reckon I've spent more time on the roads getting to gigs. And honestly, I've seen worse behaviour on the roads than I've seen at any concert of mine, and often from people who have years of experience behind the wheel. It's probably been a while since a lot of us have really thought about our driving, so take a sec and think about what you can do to help keep yourself and others safe on the roads. Us mob are almost 3 times more likely to die in a road crash than the rest of the population. So let's change that. Drive safely. Don't get distracted by the phone or others in the car, or get hot-headed or any of that stuff. You wouldn't do inconsiderate things outside a car, so why do them in one? Don't let a car change who you are. Safer driving starts with you.
What is sunburn? Sunburn is a sign that we've had too much sun. So when we get too much UV on our skin is damaged and the cells become inflamed and they become red. And that's sunburn. Sometimes it can peel, sometimes it can blister even. And it's a sign that our skin cells are damaged. And that damage in time can cause skin cancer.
Welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Nice to have your company. Tuesday, that feels like a Monday, but great long weekend. Footy was great. Weather was, it was all right. It was windy. I can't stand the wind. Sort of stirs up the emotions, doesn't it? Don't know what it was like far north. We'll find out in a second. I'm sure it was windy. They've got another cyclone maybe heading up to the far north too. Peter Campion lives in the far north, not far from Cairns. Is a retired Queensland Fire and Rescue Service fire commander and fire investigator and an independent researcher and energy realist and a libertarian. Now, he's been a prolific contributor to newspaper opinion columns for many, many years. In fact, he started off when the columns were done in stone. He was deplatformed from major newspapers in 2020. I made that up, by the way, during the COVID-19 magnificent era. which prompted him to stand as a candidate in the 2020 Queensland election and the 2022 federal election. His media ban was lifted in August 2022, and Peter is a long-term resident of far north Queensland. Peter, thanks for joining us.
G'day, Mike. It's good to talk to you again. I also ran in 2024 in the Queensland election as a candidate for One Nation in Cook, just to my north.
Oh, there you are. And isn't it interesting, speaking of One Nation, at the moment it's leading the polls, and Queensland at the moment is a One Nation state.
Well, it's not actually all that surprising. It's the only real surprise about it is that it's taken people so long to wake up. It's now self-evident that the Labor, Liberal, National, Green, Teal Uni Party, as I like to call them, are representing foreign interests. They don't represent the will of their electorates in accordance with their sole constitutional obligation, as laid out by the late great Arthur Tresby, one of our greatest constitutional scholars and a former federal MP himself. They seem to enact only the interests of the United Nations, hence Uni Party with a capital UN, and they seem to disregard pretty much everything that we want, everything from energy security and food and water security and access to the infrastructure that our forebears built. They're just ignoring us on every level, and hence you get a party that's a little bit more, open to following the will of the people, like One Nation, and people are going to go there. You know, during the height of the COVID pandemic, I travelled down through Western Queensland to the big Freedom Rally in Canberra in 2022, towing a giant trailer with a huge billboard, Freedom billboard on it. And at that point, I estimated that maybe 20 to 40% of the Western Queensland population had woken up. But sadly, a lot of them seem to have gone back to sleep. Travelling around Cook, which is the peninsula, an area almost the size of Victoria, for the 2024 campaign. It's back to 1 in 10, I think, that are aware of what's really going on in the world and the way we're being treated like tax cattle by our ruling elites, for want of a better word. Elite's not the ideal word to describe them. They're more like parasites. In a lot of ways, they've got a lot in common with mosquitoes and cattle ticks.
Yes,
draining the goodness out of it.
You just come forward.
Don't get me started.
No, don't. I mustn't do that. Tell me the opportunities, because again, I always say that North Queensland is God's country.
It is.
And one day I'll get there, hopefully still alive, because I really do love that part of the world. I think it's just simply magnificent. Tell us about some of the opportunities for those thinking about moving. Forget working in Cairns or working in an office, but if you wanted to create your own future by, for example, horticulture or something like that, what opportunities are there for those in North Queensland?
Well, there's abundant opportunity. However, they're sadly restricted by the regulatory framework imposed on us by the parasites that I just mentioned. Oh, sorry, the elites, our so-called elected representatives. We've got an abundance of resources, space, water, minerals, everything we could possibly need to be a magnificently prosperous society here in, Queensland generally, but far north Queensland in particular. However, it's all being choked off by regulatory fiat. Now, prosperity hinges on three things. The prosperity for a population: access to food, access to water, to not only drink and bathe, but to grow the food, and energy to run the whole show. And all of those are currently, for want of a better phrase, under attack by our own governments in Brisbane and in Canberra, who seem to be doing everything they possibly can to restrict them. And you touched on the Gulf of Hormuz situation and Donald Trump, who's becoming increasingly unpopular with the Make America Great Again population in the US, and probably the same around the world, choking off a large portion of the world's energy in that particular conflict. And what's the end game of that? It's going to be starvation. It's going to be pretty soon becoming the reality that there's people starting in Africa who are going to start starving to death because they're dependent on grain that comes through that waterway, and they're dependent on fuel that comes through that waterway. And this sort of brings us back to globalism and the perils of these long, tenuous supply chains, which we in North Queensland absolutely don't need to have. We have a superabundance of coal all the way up the east coast of Australia. We had a working coal mine, I guess 2 hours drive from here, up near Laura, not so long back. We could easily develop fresh coal fields. So the idea that CO2 is creating some climate catastrophe is just bizarre. It's so thoroughly debunked, even by the first principles laws of physics, Planck's law, Venus displacement law, Kirchhoff's law of thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics. All of this just completely unravels that if you apply them properly. And again, part of my background is as a fire investigator, applying gas physics to scenarios inside buildings. And all of it is built on a premise that we shouldn't be accessing so-called fossil fuels, which never were fossils. They're actually hydrocarbons. Coal, of course, is just ancient peat beds that were subject to repeated inundation that became impermeated with hydrogen over time, hydrogen escaping up through the crust. So oil and gas, empty oil and gas fields replenish over time because they're abiotic. They're a product of the breakdown of other compounds within the mantle. And there's absolutely no climate consequence to burning them. The people that create this sense of urgency that we've got to stop doing this are doing it for very nefarious reasons. They're not doing it with the interests of humanity at heart. There is no alternative chemistry to replace them. In fact, if we were to task an industrial chemist with coming up with the ideal cooking fuel, the ideal transport fuel, the ideal power station fuel, he's going to come up with the exact molecules that we use in the hydrocarbon field now. So if we have access to abundant energy in the form of oil, gas and coal, then we can produce steel and we can produce concrete and we can build dams and we can trap the superabundant water that we have in the far north. And not only, as your producer touched on earlier, that the Bradfield scheme, which was sadly shelved, it should never have been shelved, it should have been explored. But where I am, I'm on a ridge, on a clay ridge. And it squelches underfoot here. We've had so much rain in this wet season. And this is just some 19 years after Australia's greatest climatologist, our greatest climate expert, one Professor Tim Flannery, said that what rains fell wouldn't cause our rivers to run or our dams to fill. Climate is cyclic, and it's controlled by the sun. And there's just no reason for the artificial scarcity of everything that our in inverted commas elected representatives have created at the whim, at the will, at the suggestion, at the imperative, the demand of these globalist foreign bodies. The Trilateral Commission, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, United Nations, the UN agencies such as the IPCC and UNESCO. None of this is necessary. It's all about creating artificial scarcity, about channeling profits directly to the corporations that they control. So how can we fix this at a local level in far north Queensland? Well, we could start by creating a North Queensland state. Just from Gladstone North, we've got 1 million people. We've got an economy that's far bigger. I've got some figures over here, far bigger than, say, Tasmania or South Australia. We could have 1,026,000 population if we drew a line pretty much from just south of Gladstone across to the northeast corner of South Australia. We'd have that would compare to 1.8 million in South Australia and 573,000 in Tassie. We could have $291 billion of gross state product compared to less than half that in South Australia and only 40 billion in Tasmania. We could we'd have seaborne exports of $112 billion a year compared to $17 billion in South Australia and $4 billion in Tasmania. Our Constitution provides for it at Part 4, at Section 124. So, you know, why aren't we doing it? Oh, because it's all about centralisation of control, Mike. The people that are pushing these unwanted and unwarranted agendas on us are doing it because they don't want us to have a say. Well, if we had that say, we would unravel their entire project. We would, well, for a start, we wouldn't have ridiculous Middle Eastern wars interrupting the flow of the essential fuels that we need to produce food and fibre and water in far north Queensland. It's absurd that we've come to this, and it's an insult to every Australian man, woman and child that we've got to this point, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've sort of, and I was talking to many people that, you know, talking about how we're moving forward. I also would say that we're moving backwards too, because the renewables, in my own humble opinion, it's a grab for cash, and that's all I see it as. And what is someone describes them as being the invisibles, because you really can't see any good coming from what they're doing. But they keep saying, you know, Earth's going to change, we're going to boil, we're going to freeze, we're going to go flat, whatever. And then 10 years later, look at Flannery. You know, Brisbane will have no water, and I think the next bunch of years they've had floods, and you know, don't live by the water because it will rise and you will be swallowed. And he bought a house by the water.
Yeah, and $25 billion and counted squandered on desalination plants that were largely never used.
Yeah, that's right. It's just terrible. What do you see as the major? I mean, I could say, what do you see as the major, you know, or the future for which we have just chatted about? What do you see as the major, the negative that would stop the growth of northern Queensland? Is it the chase for these renewables, or is it becoming just not interested, or is it that we? And I was reading somewhere where Albanese would like us to import a great deal of our produce. Is it that attitude, or is it ignorance, failure of our education system? What do you think it is?
We're living through the planned destruction of advanced developed nations, Mike. And that's the deliberate act of a cabal of individuals that have control of our politicians through blackmail and bribery. There's no other explanation that fits all the parameters. You know, I think it was Sherlock Holmes said that once you eliminate the impossible, all that remains is the improbable. And that's where we're at. That there is no valid explanation for choking off our best farmland, as you touched on right at the start of your program, building ridiculous so-called renewable, I call them ruinable, energy projects across the best food-growing farmland to produce unreliable intermittent energy that cannot power industry and comes at an extraordinary cost. There's no logic to that. We have an abundance of wasteland we could build these things on, but they never want to build them there. Isn't that peculiar? You stitch all the facts together and you get quite the embroidery of what's really going on in this world. And it is an attack on, or particularly white people. You know, that they're not doing this so much in brown or black countries, they're doing it in white countries. And at the same time, they're choking off our food, energy and water. What are they doing? Well, they're bringing in as many people as they can from the third world. And all of those people are looking for a better life. You can't blame them for wanting to come to a more advanced nation. But it's swamping the infrastructure that we all rely on. Now we've got to wait a lot longer for hospital care. Our kids and grandkids are in much more crowded classrooms. None of this makes any sense, particularly not at a time when we've got diesel. I think I paid $3.23 the other day for diesel in Atherton, and everything's going backwards, and the rate of going backwards is accelerating. And none of it's accidental. It's entirely being induced by a class of people that sit at the top of our systems of governance, who have their hands on the policy levers and who are making everything worse by design. The purpose of any GovCo, I call it GovCo, government corporation, government-corporation, which is, well, it's what Mussolini defined as fascism, isn't it? When government and corporates combine their powers, they've got the purpose of any GovCo system is what it does. And what it's doing at the moment is it's stripping the wealth out of the mums and dads, the families, the future of Australia, and it's channeling it to corporations who are owned by a very small handful of investment funds, people like Vanguard at the top of the tree, and then BlackRock and First State and a few others that are only slightly smaller. State Street, they're just sucking the wealth out of the advanced nations, sending it off to this very small cabal of elite shareholders, and making everything worse for everybody. And what did Klaus Schwab say just a few short years ago? You will now own nothing and you will be happy. You will eat the bugs. Yeah, well, mate, it's about time we started tracking these people down, dragging them out into the street, tarring them and feathering them and putting them on a rail out of town. In fact, the quality of our governance went down dramatically when we stopped tarring and feathering politicians.
Well, it sounds kinky to me. Keep talking. No, sorry, got to stop that bit. Look, we do have to go. We should get your son-in-law on Monday.
Yeah, he's a hard man to track down at the moment. He's a very, very busy lad, our Barnaby. He's campaigning in all directions. Even my poor, long-suffering daughter hardly sees him these days.
Maybe that's a good thing.
Well, she loves him very much. I really shouldn't go there, but yeah, she loves him a lot more than I do. Let's put it that way. Although he is gaining some brownie points, since he left the squad of scoundrels called the National Party and joined a party that's at least forward facing. If we're going to keep One Nation working in our interests, the very first thing we've got to do, Mike, is we've got to ban lobbyists. We've got to cut lobbyists entirely out of our parliamentary precincts. If a lobbyist wants to interview one of our elected reps, one of our MPs or senators, then he should have to go to their electorate office and do it in front of witnesses with audio-visual recording taking place, because this is how they get control of our representatives and we don't get any say, is they bribe them and they blackmail them.
I think Pauline would be, as soon as she found out, it would be, please explain. Peter Campion, it's always a pleasure. So far, I haven't had any knock on the door from the police or people concerned about my welfare, and that's good. And dog's done well too up until now. Peter, before you go out to wrestle that bull mastiff or that poodle, how do they find out more about you?
Sorry, Mike, this is going to be loud. I've got someone at the door.
Let's just be brave.
Just on X, at good as done.
Good on you. And be nice to the dog, all right? He was quiet most of the time. Peter Campion there from up north in God's country. This is the Country Telegraph.
What fresh produce means to me, it's seasonal. So it's at Christmas time, it's mangoes. In springtime, it's stone fruit. That's what fresh produce means to me.
Fresh food to me means food that doesn't have preservatives and stuff on it.
What are those green things?
It means healthiness, probably, like to me personally.
It means quite a lot to me because I don't want to actually have dirty food.
Health, variety.
Well, all food means everything to me.
Fresh food gives me the best food, best in nutrition and usually taste as well.
Something that doesn't come in a package of any sort, that hasn't been processed in any way beyond perhaps cutting it up.
Fresh food means healthier options, crisp flavors.
Apple!
I think food security is when you have access to a lot of food.
I think it's very important.
Just having fruits and vegetables available to us all the time, which is great.
Food security is when we have enough food for everyone.
Well, I think it means having a local source for the food. I think if COVID taught us anything is we need to be self-sufficient and not rely on imports.
Going to the grocery store and knowing that you're going to get everything that you need in one place.
Food security means having food available to everyone in WA as and when they need it, a constant supply.
I've never really thought about that actually.
I would not be happy because a lot of my meals are actually made of fruit and mostly veg actually.
Would you be sad? No, I'll have chocolate.
If we didn't have access to fresh food, we'd probably be a lot more unhealthy.
I think that would be bad. I think we'd have to rely on imports from other places where we maybe wouldn't know what sort of quality we're going to get.
You're either going to have to get it from other sources, so there's going to be price, food miles involved, or you're going to go without.
Personally, I think it'd impact me a lot because I do eat a lot of fruit and vegetables.
Well, I think a lot of businesses would go under.
Fresh food connects us all. Our food system is strong, but not invincible.
Climate, cost of production, and consumer expectations are challenging producers' profitability. Local food production is essential for food security. Food security is economic and lifestyle security.
Research that creates awareness and sparks action results in impact.
Innovation is already in the ground and growing. We're investing in smarter, more sustainable ways to grow.
It's public health. It's our shared resilience.
We invest in local food systems, we invest in our future.
Australian made means made right here in Australia. But it's more than just where it's made. It means made by Australians, backing local businesses and jobs. Made for the way we live, right here. It's why buying Australian made just feels right. Australian made, made right here.
Hi, I'm Scotty Prince, former NRL player for 16 years. I hadn't been playing for the Broncos very long when I lost my dad in a car accident. It was only a couple of weeks after my 21st birthday, and it was pretty difficult. I think about my dad every single day. None of us think it can happen to us, but you just never know. You might think you're a safe driver, but no matter how experienced you are, it's important to think about what you can do to keep yourself and others safe on the road. Sometimes being behind the wheel can bring out the worst in us, and we get angry and impatient and do stupid things. But don't let a car change who you are. Safer driving starts with you.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Nice to have your company. If you're in Victoria or Queensland, New South Wales, it's a quarter past 1, and thank you for joining us. Anthony Boyle is the Executive Director of Australian Livestock and Rural Transporters Association, ALRTA. Now it's a dedicated voice for hardworking road transport companies across Australia. It was established in 1985, and they push for the diverse needs and interest of their members, ensuring the safe and sustainable growth of not only the livestock transport sector, but the entire rural industry, from livestock to essential goods. Their members keep Australia moving. As a proud federation of 6 state associations, their members join through their respective state associations, benefiting from both local and national representation. Together, they work in collaboration I'm just trying to get myself organised here, to ensure the needs of rural transporters are met across Australia, offering a strong, unified voice for their industry. We'll come back to Anthony in just 1 second. We have just a minor glitch here. Anthony Boyle is up next. And welcome back. We have our technical department running around like mad chooks, but we actually have it organised now. First of all, Anthony Boyle, thank you for joining us. We're not actually... Well, it's 1:15. It's a bit later, 17 past. Anthony, can you hear it? No, we can't. We're going to go to a quick break and we'll do the panicking off camera.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
This animal is under attack by stable flies, blood-sucking pests that cause major stress to livestock, pets and people. They bite, irritate and disrupt feeding and rest. That means weight loss, poor health and even less milk production in breeding and dairy herds. So what causes an infestation? From late spring through to autumn, Perth's sandy soils, warm weather and organic waste create the perfect breeding ground for stable flies. And here's the catch. After emerging, adult flies quickly move on if there isn't a steady supply of animals for their blood meals. They spread to neighbouring properties. They bite animals and they even bite humans. The good news is that you can stop stable flies before they start and even fix the problem if they've already moved in with simple waste management. Check moist, decaying organic waste. That's where they lay their eggs. The fix is simple. Turn off irrigation, remove organic waste like fruit and veggie waste, grass clippings, manure, waste feed and old hay at least once a week. Bury it at least a metre deep or mulch it and leave it in the sun to dry. If you find larvae, use approved pesticides. Good hygiene and regular cleanups make a big difference. Visit our website for more tips and advice to help you get ahead of the problem. Let's look after our neighbourhood. By tackling stable flies together, we can keep our animals, homes and communities healthy and happy.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. As they say, often hear it on the football, it's all happening. It really is. But hey, we had a great Easter. Now, Kim O'Keefe MP is member for Shepparton and Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Multicultural Affairs. Kim is also Deputy Chair of the Legislative Assembly Economy and Infrastructure Committee. Prior to being elected to State Parliament, Kim ran a small business in the service and training industry for almost 30 years. Kim's passion and commitment to the Shepparton Goulburn Valley area, the entire region in fact, saw her re-elected to local government in 2016 and Mayor of Greater Shepparton City Council for almost 4 years. The state government's renewable energy projects are causing great concern in many parts of Victoria. I'm going to talk to Kim today about the concern held by her constituents about the proposed Central North Renewable Energy Zone. First of all, Kim, let's see if this works. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, and sorry about that, a bit of technical issues, but no, thank you so much, Mike, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's so important that, voices across regional Victoria are heard, and we get to have these opportunities to have some, really important conversations and highlighting exactly what's happening out in the region. So thank you.
John Pettigrew from formerly of SPC, and I used to work at 3SR in Shepparton, so I do know the area very well. And my wife is from Shepparton, so
lovely. Good to hear those connections. Often I hear that when I'm out and about. There's often a connection to the region, which is exciting.
It's a magnificent part of Victoria, isn't it?
It really is, and I don't think people realise how much we do in this region, particularly when it comes to agriculture, dairy. It's significant when you look at our figures, the amount of dairy that we do, the amount of food, we really are the food bowl. And the employment, you've already talked about SPC, which are an incredible company. And, I've always lived here, so I've seen their journey and their commitment ongoing, which is so important. And as you said, I was mayor and in local government for 6 years prior to coming into state government. So always had such a strong passion for regional Victoria. And my community, I see, how important, what we do, what we offer to the state, to the nation, and global exporting. As I said, we do phenomenal things when it comes to agriculture, manufacturing, industry, small businesses. It's an incredible place that I'm really proud of. And we are having challenges, absolutely, but it's how we work through those challenges. And I think we need to always do that together, make sure that it's fair. We don't have detrimental impact on our regions. And that's what's happening with this Northern Renewable Energy Zone. It could have a significant detrimental impact on our agriculture and farming land.
Yeah, before we get into that, and it's very much of what the Victorian state government is doing right across Victoria. But what about the fuel, the inverted commas, fuel crisis we have at the moment? How's that affecting your area?
it's significant because we do have a large, farming area, and we want to make sure that they are getting the fuel, particularly the farms, that they need so that they can, really look after their crops and get the planting happening or whatever they're doing to continue. Because if we start cutting back and losing significant produce, we're already seeing some of the impact of increased costs when it comes to transporting. We're seeing that flowing to the supermarkets already, but I'm very concerned because we have farms that are already paying a significant cost when it comes to their diesel. And how do we make sure, number one, they don't run out outside the cost? How can we support them when it comes to the cost? But we are nervous about what's happening, and we need to make sure that there is a plan. I mean, how do we protect these things from happening to our communities into the future? And I think there's always so much learning during these times, but how can we be in this position where we are so vulnerable? And it's very much the sentiment across my region at the moment.
Let's talk about the renewable energy zone that just appeared out of nowhere, probably from a big black hole, because it is the last thing, such an important part of Victoria, that being Dookie, that it needs. It's it's always been a bastion of what is good about being on the land, and the education there, and the magnificent community in that area. What will this do to that part of Dookie? And also it's not just the land that they take, it's also what surrounds it. So it's either side of it. So it's not just a little transmission line that's going down or a couple of wind turbines. It affects an enormous part of the area. What's the concerns like? They would have been shocked, just as I was.
Correct. And when you look at the original plan back in May 2025, it was the Western Renewable Energy Zone that was actually listed in that draft. So this came after that draft was closed. So, to suddenly say we're not going to put it over here, which is over near Bendigo, Tetchera Way, we're going to put it over this other side without the consultation that they say those communities actually receive, we didn't. I've been working very closely with VicGrid, as has my office. We've been to meetings out at Dookie, and VicGrid have actually said, yes, we didn't follow perhaps, the consultation that we needed to. Well, do that. These communities are generational, they're historical, they're successful. We need to make sure that when these type of decisions are made, how have they got to that decision without the consideration of the impact of those communities. So what the community are calling for is just a fair process. The local government here, the local council, also put out their own consultation, which they had to pay for themselves, which I think, it shows their commitment. I'm grateful for that. But when regional communities are left on their knees begging to say, look at the impact this could have, and as we've said, Dookie, they are producing phenomenal tons and tons and tons, hundreds of tons of produce. Let them have the right to choice, and let us protect prime agricultural land, because once it's gone, it's gone. And this is where we are at. So all as we are asking is to make sure that we have the proper consultation process that does happen, so that those people in that community are given the same rights as had the other energy zone in the Western Renewable Energy Zone. As I said, they've now taken it away from there and put it over to us without giving us that same opportunity. So this is significant. And, we've got farmers that are, at the moment they're having this fuel crisis they're dealing with. We had COVID, we've had floods, we've had so much happen across our region. And when it comes to impacting our farming, just common sense of just being fair and logical. But we're not asking for anything that's unfair. We're asking for what's right. And that's to have the proper consultation process in place, and let farmers, be part of that. Let them share, their success and their reasoning to protect their land into the future. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about produce. I mean, as I said, we grow so much across our region, and these decisions at times, they just make me so frustrated because there's no logic behind it. Just do what's fair, do what's right, and then the community can some resolution. But I just think at the moment people are feeling they're just exhausted, and I worry about their mental health. You know, it's so unfair. How can we treat people with such disregard when they are so impacted, personally? And then we look at the flow on effect, as I said, about not being able to produce the amount that we are successfully doing. So don't take that away from us. And the other thing that concerns me, a great deal is you can't go to VCAT. They've taken away rights to go to VCAT now. You can get fined if someone comes onto your land. If you don't want them there, they can forcefully fine you to let them come on and make decisions about your land. It's just not right. It's wrong. And we need to stand up and we need to, let the government come out to the regions more. Like, where are they? Like, seriously, come and see what we are going through right now. It's layer on top of layer on top of layer that is impacting these small communities that are doing enormous amount of work. So I just want a fair deal. I just want a fair go for our region. And also, let's just protect our agriculture. Like, it's crazy to think they're not going to even do that they're just going to have this sort of cowboy approach that will come onto that land. We need, I support, these projects in the right places, and I support renewable energy and what the future needs to look like. There has to be change, but it just needs to be done in the right way.
What can be done? Because it's all very well talking about renewable energy. We have to look down. We can't just put in wind turbines or solar farms, transmission lines, and say, well, that's it. Because most of these companies, for example, with the wind turbines, and in particular, they're companies that are designed to last for about 20 years, and then they just close the doors. Under all agreements, the responsibility is for the landowner. Now, if the landowner has these great towers, whether they're turbines or whatever, and at the end of 20 years they need to be replaced, which they do, under the contracts that have been handed out and government legislation and stuff, it's the landowner that is to pay for these, the replacement or the removal of, which would just amount to millions and millions of dollars. What will your government do to protect the farmer, the guy on the land, the people of the family on the land? Because to have government say, we're going to come in and we're going to do what we want and you have got no say, that is not how a government should act. And I would imagine that your government won't stand for that.
No, 100%, because, then that's obviously, we're all about regional Victoria. We know what regional Victoria needs and we know how to protect it. And look, going back to some of the things we've already announced, reinstating landholders' appeal rights to VCAT for a start, to stop these projects happening if it's not in the right location and it's not going to bring benefit to those communities and it's not going to align with what we need. And introducing a 2-kilometre buffer, that's the other thing, between homes and wind turbines as well, because the impacts on even residents can be quite significant. And the other thing is establishing a community benefit fund to ensure lasting local investment, and unlocking low emission gas reserves to help bring down prices for households and businesses. But in the decommissioning, as you've rightly raised, it's just mind-boggling to think that, then what's going to happen to those panels? Where are they going to go? We're talking about lowering emissions and, trying to protect the environment and all those things that come with that. But then you've got this decommissioning of, all of this, solar panels and whatever else it takes to bring all these things to life. And then after that period of time, as you say, that, who's going to pay for that? The farmer that's actually been trying to make some money out of that. How does that balance out? What will he actually make out of that? It comes back to my common question about why do we not have a stronger understanding of this, and how can you just go ahead and say, well, this is what the expectation will be, without having, further consideration of what this could mean to that land and that landowner at that time. But I'm really concerned about the decommissioning, as is the local residents. And look, we've seen some solar come across our region in the right places, and it can be successful. But look, it's messy. I just don't think there's the whole plan, the whole package. There is no proper plan. It just seems to be not aligning with what could work, for communities, for regions, for farmers. And we will stand up for that. But I think when you take away rights, when you take away landholders' rights, and they can't even appeal to VCAT, it's just wrong on so many levels. And it's just wrong. And we need to make sure that those rights are reinstated, and we will, and make sure that, when it is located, it's going to have the right protections in place for community as a whole.
Jacinta Allen, I mean, I'm no fan of her at all. However, Labor has this uncanny knack of coming back into power, getting back. Who would ever think Dan Andrews was going to be premier for 438 years? But he was. What is, if someone was to vote your party and the Nationals and the Libs together in as the next government for Victoria, what is different from what they're saying? Because you also believe in renewables, and you've got to put the interconnectors somewhere. You've got to put the turbines somewhere. What is the difference between what you're offering, your party, and to what the government's offering at the moment?
Yeah, and there's lots of differences when it comes to Labor and it comes to the coalition. As a country girl, I just get so frustrated. So there's so much we could talk about when it comes to Labor, and we've got to change government. I think, and Victorians are feeling it, they're seeing it, every single day it's impacting on their lives. And, of course we have to have a change of government and, just that financial management in a more responsible manner to start with. But just that people's rights. I mean, just reinstate fairness, making sure that, and number one, financial management, making sure that the financial management of our state, when I see some of the things that just so, like the $15 billion on the big build sites recently, the RORTs, $15 billion, and you see communities on their knees. And when it comes to just small community services that are getting cut back, and then they're wasting. I just find the sheer amount of waste is just, I had a business for 30 years. If I ran my books like that, oh my God, we'd be shut down. My husband had a business as well. And, we know what it means. You've got to balance your books. You've got to be able to, put up projects that you can afford. We did things through our businesses over the years that we financially could manage to do that. This state is not doing that. They're taking on things they cannot financially manage. And then we are all being impacted by that every single day. And it needs to turn around. Jess Wilson is doing a fantastic job. I think she gets it. The Libs, they're coming to be, much better united. Let's hope that continues. And, us Nats, we lobby for regional Victoria. It's who we are. We've got, as a coalition, I think we've got so much to offer. We've just got to have that opportunity because we are going backwards fast. We really are. And I think people are, every single day, I hear it, I see it. I lose sleep over it, if you like, because I just get so concerned, to be honest. I've never seen people struggle in my community that I've always lived here like I am today. And I'm not just saying that for political brownie points. I'm telling you realistically, my office, we are so busy in my office at the moment. We're in the main street of Shepparton. We say our doors open, come and see us. And, we had about 10 through this morning, and it's cost of living. It's, where do I get vouchers? Where do I get support? People are so struggling. And like I said, I've always lived here. I've never seen it to the capacity that we are seeing and feeling right now. And you know what it is also? It's people that haven't in the past, people that are saying, I just can't afford my mortgage. Whether it be a rent or a mortgage, people are just, cost of living has become so hard. And I worry. I really worry for the future. I want people to, young people to be able to afford a home, to be able to work hard and have a future. And how do we support that as government? Well, they're not getting that support at the moment. They're getting higher costs, higher bills, not being able to afford to buy a home, not be able to afford to pay their rent, to keep a roof over their head. And they're choosing this week between food and fuel, I mean, it's phenomenal. And look, we know the fuel, it is what it is, and we are going to try and manage that the best we can with the federal government. But just cost of living prior to fuel it's significant. People are struggling like they never have before.
It's a shocker, isn't it? Was it like 5 terms now, isn't it? I think 4 with Dan and 1 with Jacinta Allen, that they've been in power. I could be wrong by 1 term, but it's a very, very long time. Your policies, I mean, I've always leant towards the Conservatives, but why hasn't it resonated with the Victorians?
Well, I'm hoping it will now. We've got,
what's the difference?
Cost of living, as I said, the number one. We need to address cost of living. Housing, health. Health is a huge thing, particularly out here in the regions. I've got a half-finished hospital here as we speak. You can't half-finish a hospital. We've only had what we call stage 1 of our hospital. We don't have an integrated cancer centre, which let's invest in the things that really matter. Health, housing, cost of living, crime, is up there as well. People are concerned. They're frightened in their homes at the moment. So we just have to have the policies in place that will help people have a future in our country and in our state. And as I said, health alluding to our hospital here, it's just wrong to think, getting back to that $15 billion, it just makes me so angry to think that could be lost on a big bill brought. And yet my hospital's sitting here, not completed. It's those type of things that we need to prioritise, and we will, as a coalition, we will prioritise health, cost of living, housing, making it more affordable for young people to afford a home. All those things that just turn a corner. We have to turn a corner. We can't keep going. And if we stay with Labor government, we're going to be going the same direction. And that has to change. And I'm hearing it more and more. And I'm not just saying, Maria, I'm out and people are saying to me, I used to be a Labor voter, I won't be anymore. And I'm hearing that more and more. We're having people coming into our office, talking to us about, they can't stick with Labor anymore because they're not having the future that they want. And that's how I see it as well. That's how all Victorians should see it. We want to have a better future ahead. And if you keep they're saying, if you keep doing what you're doing, nothing changes. And that'll be the case if Labor stays. So I see such a shift. I really do. I've always been interested in, politics to a certain level, but also community benefits to community. And we are missing out dreadfully, particularly out in the regions. And they're taking money away from, as I said, small grassroots organisations. Cut. It's just constant. And it's almost like, what's today going to bring? What are they going to cut today? What are they going to add another tax to? What's going to increase? Budget's coming out soon. We have asks in the budget. Just simple things like a bus review for my region. It's been 15 years since we've had a bus review. And now with the free transport, which we welcome, we don't have enough services already. I have towns across my electorate that have minimal or no bus services. So how can you get a free bus when you can't get one? And even in our central district, heading out to South Shep, out to Kyla, there's no bus services that extend out enough, to even support our workers in the CBD. These small asks, things that I've been calling for, that they just keep turning their back on. They prioritise these big city-centric projects that aren't helping us out in the region. So, we need a government that governs for all of Victoria and prioritises health, housing, cost of living, those things that are impacting on our communities the most, and they're not at the moment.
Do you think there's a massive fail from both the opposition and the state government, and in federally the opposition and the federal government? We see a tsunami of one nation, and Queensland now is the preferred. One nation is the preferred party. Whether that eventuates and does stuff in the next election, who knows? But they must be a concern. The concern would be is that they're resonating with what people want, and the major parties, the legacy parties, are not resonating with the community, whether it's Labor or the Conservatives. Is there a lesson to be learnt? Because it happens all the time. We all lose our way sometimes. Is there a lesson to be learned from One Nation that they are resonating with the constituents all throughout Queensland and Australia, and there is that tsunami? What can be learned? How can we get back to because I get great comfort from good opposition and good government, because good opposition makes government good. And you'd have to admit that the opposition has been fairly down in the last 10, 15 years in Victoria, which has allowed the government to do what they like. We talk about all these terrible indiscretions, but a good opposition would stop that, and there hasn't been a good opposition yet in Queensland. The opposition, which is the Labor Party, they're being swept over by the tsunami of One Nation. So is there a lesson to be learnt from One Nation if you look over your shoulder and up north? Because if they're resonating to the people of Queensland, and they seem to be resonating right across the country and growing, what can be learnt?
Yeah, look, it is getting raised, of course. We're not stupid, we see it. And I think there are some things that, people do hear and they focus on those things from One Nation, whether it be just the Australian flag or, some of the things that they're pushing out. And I think the thing, as a local member, number one, we just need to be, really connected to our local communities for a start, and making sure that as a coalition, that we are all hitting the targets, and there will be some misses. And I think, the coalition has identified that. Absolutely. There's some learnings that we've had, particularly from the federal and now the state election coming up. We have to have our eyes wide open and our ears, listening as well to see what we could be doing better. And, one nation cannot form government. So that's a big message out. If you, put one nation, they won't form government. So, it's a coalition that we've got to choose to get a change and to get rid of Labor. And, we will be connecting to our constituents. We'll be getting the policies in place. We've, have announced some policies, but we'll have strong policies coming through too, and making sure that we, there's definitely always learnings and there's things that we should and could be doing better. And I absolutely am hearing that in our party rooms and, working with the coalition. I mean, I stand very shoulder to shoulder and making sure that we do have a voice in that room, and that we are making sure that we need to listen, and we need to make sure that people in our state and our country have faith in us and in the coalition. And if there's learnings, learn from that, make the changes. As I said, Jess is doing a great job. She's, really connecting to the people, and she's pulling her party together. And, the Nats have always been such a collective and such a strong voice and such a great party. I'm not just saying it, I'm so grateful for that, because, we are a strong party, and working, with our Liberal partners, it's really important that, we have synergy, and that we are, always making sure we can do better and give the state of Victoria confidence and faith. And that's what we have to do to get them to support us. And that's really it's in my mind, obviously good policies, but they have to have the confidence and the faith for us to come into government. And we need to do that for the change that has to happen. We can't keep going. But yeah, I'm listening to what you're saying, about One Nation. It's, things, often there'll be roller coasters, things up and down, coming and going. And, if there's learnings to be had, I think, what we all need to do is just, really make sure we're connected to our community and giving the right policies out and working hard and being on the ground and being seen, being visual in your communities and as a whole coalition, making sure that we are hitting the targets.
I have to admit, you're being in the bush. People in the bush aren't terribly keen about tiptoeing around the edges. They tell you directly, and you've lasted. You've done a great job, so good on you.
Thank you, Murray.
And that's probably what we need in major markets. For example, throughout Melbourne, we actually probably need a reality tablet to understand that what happens, for example, in the rural areas or the bush areas of Australia does affect what happens within that particular electorate, such as in Kew and those places, because you pop down to your supermarket and you will see all sorts of horrible price increases, and you head down to your servo and stuff, nothing to do with the country, of course, but they can understand that if you're paying X amount of dollars per litre in leafy Malvern or somewhere, that you could expect that in the bush they're going to pay a lot more, which will then push up the cost of living for, all the produce and all that sort of stuff that comes from the country areas. So I think an appreciation from not just the electorate, but from also those elected in office in those particular cap cities need to understand that the bush is very, very important. And they should probably come down and visit you every now and then and have a meeting with some of the locals. I'm sure they'll be told exactly what to do.
And we have had the shadows come in, and and I was disappointed. Jacqueline Symes was in town last week for an opening of an early childhood centre. I should have been invited. It's in my electorate. I don't care if you're opposition. I should be there.
Of course.
And I would like to have had the opportunity to, while she's in town, just to bring her in and talk about, the immediate needs and small business. We have amazing, small local businesses here that, they've been through tough times, as we've said, COVID, floods, the floods were terrible in 2022, and they don't just pass you by. Those impacts are still there. We had the neighbouring communities that had the recent bushfires, that's just on my border, edge of town. And, we were pulling our sleeves up, jumping in, helping, regional communities are very connected. They're very united. And I saw it when I was mayor during COVID. And we care very deeply for each other. And when we see them coming into our community, trying to ram these renewable energy projects down our throat, there's a petition going through Parliament at the moment. The community are really advocating. They're doing the hard yards. They're all coming together. to be a voice and stand up, for who we are and what we need. And I'm proud of that because your neighbours here, you're right. If I go to the supermarket, my husband, if he's waiting outside, he knows it's going to be a time because I'll stop and talk to everybody. But that's part of the joy of being in this role, and I always say it's not about me, it's about we. It's about all of us as a community. When I walk up those steps of Parliament, my community's on my shoulders. I'm just the person representing and having that privilege, but it's their voices that really matter to me and what I do, how I can actually be that voice for them. And this is one of those times. But I'm appreciative of it. But look, as I say, the frustration for me is there because the Labor government are just, the debt, the waste of money, the Commonwealth Games. I don't know if you know, but that was actually born here in Shepparton, that idea, the Commonwealth Games, that regional model. And I was mayor at that time. And when that was announced that day that we were going to be having the regional Commonwealth Games, my CEO at the time and I jumped in the car, went to Ballarat for the announcement. I wasn't even allowed on the ground. I wasn't a member of state parliament, I was the mayor, but it was so awful. They just pushed us out of everything. It was obviously a ploy coming into that election. And then when it was announced that it was going to be cancelled, I was just so, just so many moments of just how can they get away with these things so often? And it needs to stop. It just is waste of money, $600 million Commonwealth Games for someone else to host it. Like, oh my goodness, go and pay for someone else to do that. We get nothing. We had a BMX and lighting and stuff put up here, but that economic opportunity for our regions and that legacy of having such a significant thing happen in our community. But, they were told to wait longer than what they did. 2032 would have been better. They just ignored some of the business case. And, as I said, it was probably just a ploy. But I was very involved in that and very disappointed. The way it all just, got railroaded, if you like, and it just finished. But just also the money, the waste of money, $600 million. It's just constant. It's a constant and it needs to stop. It just needs to stop.
If you guys don't get in, truly, every time, and Jen has very strong ties to the state. Be careful here, but she knows how your party operates inside out. But if you guys don't do better this time, because it's been such a letdown and it becomes quite dismal. It reminds me, can you imagine a Conservative supporter or voter is very much like a St Kilda supporter, that we could have almost won that game. And we have to wait for the next game or the next season. And the same thing with the Conservatives in Victoria. You've been found wanting or lacking, and I think hopefully under Jess, hopefully with your vision, that this can be turned around. Because if you don't get in this time, there is either something horribly wrong. There's three things horribly wrong with people's minds, which could possibly be the case. Horribly wrong with the whole system, or that the Conservatives should probably look at doing something else. So this probably is the big cruncher for the Conservatives. If you don't win, because you've got so many things going for you, if you can't win this one, I would probably do something else, like become an astronaut or something. But this is it. This is your chance to get into power and to fix things, make Victoria a great state. If you can't do it this time, then I would suggest that everybody give up, because you will never do it. It's you have so much ammunition, and I think that's why I mentioned One Nation. Can we learn from that? Because it could be just the honeymoon before reality hits. But at the moment in Queensland, at least, they are doing very well, and across the country there is a renewed support for One Nation, and we need that now to move towards the Conservatives in Victoria to bring back some sensibility to Victoria and accountability. And I think we should have more conversations on this, Kim. I think this is very important. I think Bush needs to be looked after also way more, because it has been trodden on. And the Bush has a lot of cow manure, but it doesn't need that dumped on them. And that's what the state government is doing at the moment. Kim O'Keefe, MP, if somebody wants to find out more about you or just have a natter, where they can meet you in the supermarket, which aisle? How do they do that?
Yes, I'm happy to chat. Often some of the best conversations happen there too. No, look, it's so important. But thank you. And as I said, I really appreciate it because it's so important that people get to understand regional communities, our struggles, our opportunities, our strengths. There's so many strengths as well, and I'm proud of that. But we need the support, and we need to make sure that, we get the opportunity to be part of everything that everyone else is, whether that be consultation or whatever that looks like with those renewables. But I'm very proud of where I live and I'm very grateful for it, but change does need to happen. And, we've got a really good candidate in Bendigo. Look out, Jacinta. I mean, Andrew Lathan did so well at the federal election. He's an amazing candidate. I had to throw that in. I know Andrew personally, and, he's a small business owner as well. He's a community champion. He's everything that I am in many, many ways. And he's there for the right reasons, exactly why I'm here as well. And that's just serve our communities and just, get the best we can for the people of Victoria and for our own communities. It's all we want to achieve. And you're right, we just need to, just get into government and change needs to happen. And as I say, if you keep voting like you've been voting, change will not happen. This is our chance. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My door's open always for my community and always here for a chat.
Thank you very much. Kim O'Keefe, MP. We went way over time, but that was a great discussion and I appreciate your time. This is the Country Telegraph. Thank you so much to my guest. It was a bit chaotic behind the scenes, but we got there and what a fantastic program today. And we'll do the same tomorrow, kicking off at midday throughout midday tomorrow. Let's turn this off. There we are. Midday tomorrow and going to whatever time we finish because we do have some great guests on talking about important issues that concern the rest of Australia. Regional Australia, rural Australia, and of course the outback, and we are all Australians. Thank you again. Be kind, be nice to your neighbours, kind to your neighbours. Hope your football team did well over the weekend, and don't forget we've got the big, what do they call it, the away round or something in South Australia. So that'll be another one, and only a few days away because we had a short week. Thank you so much. This is the Country Telegraph.